What happens when the game you play for fun ends with divorce papers on your kitchen table? How can one little secret, meant to keep things exciting, become the reason you lose your whole family? The moment I saw my husband's lawyer at the door, I realized my innocent fun was about to cost me everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning sun filtered through our kitchen blinds as I sat across from Marcus at our small breakfast table, watching him methodically eat his cereal while scrolling through emails on his phone. 6 years of marriage had reduced our conversations to logistics about bills, Lily's school schedule, and whose turn it was to take out the trash. "Don't forget Lily has soccer practice at 4, Marcus said without looking up, his voice carrying that familiar tone of distant politeness that had replaced the warmth we once shared. "I know," I replied, my own phone buzzing with a text that made me smile involuntarily. It was from Damien Voss, a charming sales manager I'd met at a networking event last month. His messages had become the highlight of my mundane days. "Good morning, beautiful. Hope your day is as lovely as you are." I couldn't help but grin as I typed back quickly. You always know exactly what to say to make me smile. "What's so funny?" Marcus asked, finally glancing up from his phone with a slight frown. "Oh, just Rose being silly," I lied smoothly, referring to my younger sister. "You know how she is with her random memes." Marcus's eyes lingered on my face for a moment longer than usual, and I felt a flutter of something, guilt maybe, or excitement at the danger of almost being caught. But he just nodded and returned to his phone. "Marcus, you're being paranoid," I said with a laugh when I noticed him still watching me. "Can't a woman laugh at her sister's jokes without an interrogation?" Our 6-year-old daughter Lily wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, her dark hair messy from sleep. She climbed onto my lap, and I automatically wrapped my arms around her while continuing to text Damien with one hand. "Mommy, why are you always on your phone now?" Lily asked innocently, her big brown eyes, so much like Marcus's, looking up at me with genuine curiosity. "I'm not always on my phone, sweetheart," I said, quickly putting the device face down on the table. "Mommy just has to stay in touch with work and family." But even as I said it, I could feel Marcus's gaze on me again, more intense this time. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker with unspoken tension. "I need to get ready for school," Marcus announced, standing abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor with an unpleasant screech. "Can you handle drop-off today? I have an early faculty meeting." "Of course," I replied, bouncing Lily gently on my knee. "We'll be fine, won't we, baby?" After Marcus left for his shower, I allowed myself to check Damien's latest message. "I can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You deserve so much more attention than you're getting at home." My heart raced as I typed back, "You make me feel like myself again, like I'm worth something." "Mommy, you're smiling at your phone again," Lily observed, tilting her head. "Am I?" I laughed, ruffling her hair. "I guess I'm just happy today." Later that evening, as I was folding laundry in our bedroom, Marcus appeared in the doorway holding a piece of paper. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture made my stomach clench. "Elund, can you explain this charge?" He held up our credit card statement, pointing to a line item. "Bistro Moderne, $47. Last Tuesday at lunch." I barely glanced at the paper, continuing to fold Lily's tiny shirts with deliberate calm. "Oh, that was just a work lunch. You know how these client meetings go. Sometimes you have to wine and dine them a little." "Since when do you take clients to lunch? You process insurance claims from your desk." "Since I started trying to build better relationships with our corporate accounts," I replied smoothly, meeting his eyes with what I hoped looked like innocent confidence. "I'm trying to advance my career, Marcus. I thought you'd be proud." He stared at me for a long moment, the credit card statement still in his hand. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, but I also knew Marcus. He hated confrontation, always gave people the benefit of the doubt. It was one of the things that had attracted me to him initially, and now it was working in my favor. "Right," he said finally, but his voice carried a note I'd never heard before, suspicion mixed with something that might have been disappointment. "I guess I don't remember you mentioning any client meetings." "Well, you've been pretty distracted with your own work lately," I said, adding just a touch of hurt to my voice. "We don't exactly share every detail of our days anymore, do we?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and for a moment I thought he might press the issue. Instead, he folded the statement and tucked it into his pocket. "You're right," he said quietly. "I guess we don't." As he turned to leave, I felt a strange mixture of victory and unease. I'd won this round, but something in Marcus's eyes as he walked away suggested the game was far from over. That night, as Marcus slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling thinking about Damien's latest message. "Can't wait to see you again soon. You light up every room you enter." For the first time in months, I felt truly alive. 3 weeks later, I found myself checking my appearance in the bathroom mirror at my insurance office, applying lipstick I'd bought specifically for these lunch meetings with Damien. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, but I could see the glow in my cheeks that hadn't been there in years. "Looking good, Alund," my coworker Janet commented as she washed her hands at the sink beside me. "Hot date?" "Just a client lunch," I replied with a casual smile, the lie rolling off my tongue easier each time. "You know how it is. Got to look professional." But as I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with Damien's confirmation text. "Table for 2 at Bistro Moderne." Can't wait to see that beautiful smile again. The restaurant had become our regular spot, intimate enough for private conversation, but public enough to maintain plausible deniability. Damien was already seated when I arrived, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his smile warm and welcoming in a way that made my heart skip. "There's my favorite insurance expert," he said, standing to pull out my chair like a perfect gentleman. When was the last time Marcus had done something like that? "You're terrible," I laughed, settling into my seat. "What if someone hears you?" "Let them," Damien said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "A man should be allowed to appreciate a beautiful, intelligent woman when he sees one." We ordered our usual, Caesar salads and wine, though I limited myself to 1 glass since I had to return to work. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as it always did with Damien. He asked about my day, my dreams, my thoughts on everything from politics to movies. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel like the most fascinating person in the world. "You know what I love about you, Alund," he said, reaching across the table to briefly touch my hand. "You have this spark, this energy. It's magnetic." "Marcus doesn't seem to think so anymore," I found myself saying, then immediately felt guilty for the betrayal implicit in those words. "Marcus is a fool," Damien said firmly. "Any man who doesn't appreciate what he has at home doesn't deserve it." His phone buzzed on the table, and I caught a glimpse of the name Clara before he quickly flipped it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stuff," he said, but I noticed a slight tension in his jaw. "Nothing that can't wait." We spent another hour talking and laughing, and I found myself thinking how easy this felt, how natural. With Marcus, every conversation lately seemed to require effort, like we were both speaking different languages and struggling to translate. "I should probably head back," I said reluctantly, checking my watch. "Of course," Damien agreed, signaling for the check. "But Alund, be careful, okay? I mean, with us meeting like this, I don't want you to get into any trouble at home." "What Marcus doesn't know won't hurt him," I replied, then immediately wondered why I'd said something so callous. But Damien just smiled and squeezed my hand. "You deserve to be happy," he said simply. Back at the office, I felt like I was floating. The afternoon passed in a blur of processed claims and filed paperwork, but my mind kept drifting back to Damien's laugh, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Around 4 o'clock, I overheard Janet talking to our supervisor, Mrs. Peterson, near the copy machine. I'm just saying she's been going out to lunch a lot lately, Janet was saying in a low voice. Always dressed up, always secretive about where she's going. Maybe she's job hunting, Mrs. Peterson suggested. Maybe, Janet replied, but her tone suggested she thought otherwise. Or maybe she's got herself a lunch boyfriend. You know how these married women get when they hit their 30s, start looking for excitement elsewhere. My cheeks burned as I pretended to focus on my computer screen. When Janet returned to her desk, she gave me a knowing look that made my stomach churn. Everything all right, Illumined? You look a little flushed. Just fine, I said brightly. Probably just the office heating acting up again. Janet hummed, clearly unconvinced. That evening, Marcus was unusually chatty during dinner, asking detailed questions about my day, my workload, my co-workers. At first, I was pleased by his renewed attention, but gradually I began to feel like I was being interrogated. So, what did you have for lunch? He asked casually as he helped Lily cut her chicken. Just grabbed a sandwich at my desk, I lied smoothly. Too busy to go out today. That's funny, Marcus said, still in that same casual tone. Because when I called your office around 1:30, Janet said you were out at a client lunch. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Oh, right, I forgot about that. It was just a quick meeting with the Henderson account. The Henderson account, Marcus repeated slowly. Isn't that the one you closed last month? Panic fluttered in my chest, but I forced myself to laugh. God, Marcus, what is this? An audit? Can't I have lunch without filing a report? I'm just trying to take an interest in your work, he said, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. You always used to complain that I didn't ask enough questions about your day. Well, now you're asking too many, I snapped, immediately regretting the harsh tone. Lily looked between us with wide, worried eyes. Are you and Daddy fighting? She asked in a small voice. No, sweetheart, I said quickly, reaching over to stroke her hair. Daddy's just being silly, asking Mommy lots of questions like she's on a game show. Marcus's expression softened when he looked at Lily, but when his gaze returned to me, the suspicion was still there. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Marcus's mother, Helen. Illumined, dear, I was hoping you and Marcus and little Lily could come for Sunday dinner this week, she said in her crisp, no-nonsense voice. That sounds lovely, Helen. I'll check with Marcus. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you first, Helen continued. I've been worried about you lately. You seemed distracted at Lily's birthday party last month. My grip tightened on the phone. Helen had always been perceptive, sometimes uncomfortably so. Distracted? I don't know what you mean. Well, you were on your phone quite a bit, and you seemed, I don't know, somewhere else. Is everything all right between you and Marcus? Everything's fine, Helen, I said firmly. We're just busy with work and Lily and all the usual stuff. You know how it is. Helen hummed, sounding unconvinced. Well, if you ever need to talk, you know I'm here. I've always thought of you as the daughter I never had. After I hung up, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. Was I really being that obvious? Or were people just being paranoid? My phone buzzed with a text from Rose. How are things going with your lunch friend? I quickly typed back, What lunch friend? Come on, sis. I can hear it in your voice when we talk. You sound happier, more alive. Just be careful, okay? There's nothing to be careful about. We're just friends. Sure you are. Just don't do anything stupid, Illumined. You have a good life. As I climbed into bed beside Marcus, who was already asleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that walls were slowly closing in around me. But then I thought about Damien's smile, the way he made me feel beautiful and interesting and valued, and I decided that everyone else was just jealous. After all, what was the harm in a little friendship? The annual neighborhood barbecue was in full swing when we arrived at the Hendersons' backyard, the smell of grilled burgers and the sound of children's laughter filling the warm Saturday afternoon. I'd spent extra time getting ready, choosing a sundress that I knew looked good on me and styling my hair in loose waves. "Mommy, can I go play with Emma?" Lily asked, tugging on my hand as soon as she spotted her best friend by the swing set. "Of course, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you." Marcus wandered off toward the grill, where a group of men had gathered, leaving me to navigate the social dynamics alone. I didn't mind. I was feeling confident, attractive, energized by my recent lunches with Damien. "Elund, you look fantastic," called Sarah Mitchell from across the patio. She was standing with a group of other neighborhood wives, all holding wine glasses and looking perfectly suburban. "Thanks," I replied, accepting a glass of white wine from the drinks table. You know what they say, when you feel good on the inside, it shows on the outside. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up," laughed Jennifer Walsh. "You're practically glowing." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself holding court with a growing circle of neighbors, regaling them with funny stories from work and making witty observations about suburban life. The wine had loosened my tongue, and I was enjoying being the center of attention. "Speaking of excitement," I said during a lull in conversation, "Marcus has been so buried in his lesson plans lately, I barely see him. Sometimes I wonder if he'd notice if I disappeared for a week." The group chuckled, but I noticed a few uncomfortable glances exchanged. "Oh, you know how teachers are," said Jennifer diplomatically. "My brother-in-law teaches high school, always grading papers or planning something." "Right, but there's a difference between being dedicated and being completely checked out of your marriage," I continued, the wine making me bolder than I should have been. "I mean, when was the last time your husband forgot your anniversary, or didn't notice when you got your hair cut, or fell asleep during a movie you specifically picked out to watch together?" The laughter was more forced now, and I could see Sarah glancing over toward the grill where Marcus stood with the other men. "Marriages work for everyone," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Clara Voss, Damien's wife, approaching our group. She was an elegant woman with short auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to see everything. "Clara, I didn't know you and Damien were coming," I said, hoping my voice sounded more casual than I felt. "Last-minute decision," Clara replied smoothly, accepting a glass of wine. "Damien thought it would be good to get to know the neighbors better." "Well, we were just discussing the challenges of keeping marriages interesting after a few years," I said, taking another sip of wine. "You and Damien seem to have figured it out. You always look so happy together." Clara's smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. "We work at it. Communication is key, don't you think? Being honest with each other about everything." Something in her tone made me pause, but the wine and the attention from the group urged me forward. "Honest, sure, but sometimes a little mystery doesn't hurt," I said with a laugh. "I mean, Marcus knows everything about me, where I am, what I'm doing, who I'm talking to. Sometimes I think relationships need a little space to breathe." "Space to breathe," Clara repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting perspective." Just then, Damien appeared at Clara's side, his arm sliding around her waist. When he saw me, his expression flickered with something. Surprise, worry, I couldn't tell. "Ladies," he said with his charming smile, "hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just girl talk," I said brightly, though I noticed how his presence seemed to change the energy of the group. "Elund was just sharing her thoughts on marriage," Clara said, her eyes never leaving my face. "Very enlightening." The conversation continued for another few minutes, but I could feel the dynamic shifting. People began drifting away to check on children or refresh their drinks, until it was just Clara, Damien, and me standing together. "Well, I should go find Marcus," I said, suddenly feeling the need to escape Clara's penetrating gaze. "Of course," Clara said. "Give him my regards." As I walked away, I could feel them watching me. When I glanced back, they were deep in quiet conversation, Clara's hand on Damien's arm, both of them looking serious. I found Marcus by the dessert table, alone, staring at a plate of brownies with an expression I couldn't read. "There you are," I said, sliding up beside him. Having fun? Sure, he replied, but his voice was flat. Sounds like you're having a great time. I could hear you laughing from across the yard. Just catching up with the neighbors, I said, though something in his tone put me on edge. You should come join us instead of standing over here by yourself. I think I'll pass, Marcus said, finally looking at me. Some of the guys were telling me interesting things about their wives' lunch schedules. Apparently, there's been some talk around the neighborhood. My blood ran cold. What kind of talk? The kind where people notice when someone's car is regularly parked at restaurants during lunch hours. The kind where people wonder why someone needs to dress up so much for work meetings. Marcus, you're being ridiculous. Am I? He set down his plate and turned to face me fully. Because Tom Henderson mentioned seeing you at Bistro Moderne 3 times in the past month. Always with the same man. Always looking very friendly. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Tom Henderson needs to mind his own business. So you're not denying it. There's nothing to deny. I told you, I've been taking clients to lunch. If Tom wants to make something scandalous out of normal business meetings, that's his problem. But even as I said the words, I could see in Marcus's eyes that he wasn't buying it anymore. The hurt there was so raw, so deep, that for a moment I almost told him everything. Instead, I doubled down. You know what, Marcus? Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as Tom Henderson does, you'd know what's actually going on in my life instead of listening to gossip. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. I should have been paying more attention. Something in his tone, calm, almost resigned, sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't the Marcus I knew, the one who avoided conflict and always gave me the benefit of the doubt. I think we should go, he said quietly. I'll get Lily. As we drove home in silence, Lily chattering in the back seat about her games with Emma, I kept replaying the conversation with Clara, the look in Damien's eyes, the hurt in Marcus's voice. That night, after Lily was in bed, I was brushing my teeth when I found a small piece of paper tucked into my purse. My hands shook as I unfolded it. In neat handwriting, it simply said, I know. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature to know who had written it. The anonymous note haunted me for days. I found myself jumping every time my phone rang, checking over my shoulder in parking lots, analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. Clara Voss knew something, but how much? Marcus had become a different person since the barbecue. Gone was the distracted, preoccupied husband I'd grown used to dismissing. In his place was someone watchful, methodical, almost clinical in his observations. He asked fewer questions but seemed to notice everything. I'm working late tonight, I announced on Thursday morning, testing the waters. Big deadline on the Morrison account. Okay, Marcus replied simply, not looking up from his coffee. No follow-up questions, no complaints about dinner or childcare arrangements. Just acceptance. It should have felt like a victory, but instead, it made my skin crawl. At work, I could barely concentrate. Janet had been giving me knowing looks all week, and I'd caught her whispering with Mrs. Peterson twice. When Damien texted asking to meet for lunch, I almost said no, can't today. Things are complicated. His response came quickly. Everything okay? You seem stressed lately. Just family stuff. Marcus is being suspicious. Maybe we should cool things down for a while. The suggestion hit me like a slap. After weeks of telling me how special I was, how much I deserved, he wanted to back away at the first sign of trouble. I thought you cared about me. I do care. That's why I'm worried. Clara has been asking questions. My blood turned to ice. What kind of questions? About my lunch schedule? Where I go? Who I see? She's not stupid, Alund. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should be more careful. Take a break until things settle down. I stared at my phone screen, feeling abandoned and angry. All those lunches, all those conversations about how I deserved better, how I was special, and at the first sign of real consequences, he was running scared. Fine. Whatever you want. Don't be like that. This isn't easy for me either. But I was already putting my phone away, hurt and furious and feeling more alone than ever. That evening, Helen called during dinner. Marcus, dear, I was hoping you could come by this weekend. Your father wants to show you something in the garage, and I'd love to spend some time with Lily. That sounds great, Mom, Marcus replied. Saturday afternoon work? Perfect. Alund, you're welcome too, of course. Actually, I might have to work this weekend, I said quickly. The last thing I needed was Helen's sharp eyes studying me for hours. On a Saturday? Helen's voice carried a note of surprise. You have been busy with work lately. Insurance never sleeps, I said with forced lightness. After Marcus hung up, he looked at me with that new, unreadable expression. You know, Mom mentioned something interesting the other day. She said Rose called looking for you last Tuesday around lunchtime, but Rose thought you were at work. My fork clattered against my plate. So Rose seemed confused when Mum said you were probably at a client lunch. Apparently Rose had just talked to you the night before, and you'd mentioned how quiet things were at work. No big accounts, no client meetings scheduled. The room felt like it was closing in around me. Rose misunderstood, or maybe I forgot to mention the meeting when we talked. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but his tone suggested he thought otherwise. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every shift of Marcus beside me, every distant car passing on the street made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I gave up and went to the kitchen for some water. Marcus was sitting at the table in the dark. Couldn't sleep either, I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Just thinking, he replied. About what? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, about trust, about how well we really know the people we love. Marcus, I keep thinking about something my dad told me when we got married. He said the hardest part of marriage isn't the big fights or the major decisions. It's the little lies, the small betrayals, the way they add up over time until you wake up one day and realize you're living with a stranger. His voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, that it was more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. I don't know what you're trying to say. I think you do. We stared at each other in the dim light filtering through the kitchen window. I wanted to confess everything, to throw myself on his mercy and beg forgiveness. Instead, I went on the attack. You know what your problem is, Marcus. You're cold, distant. You come home every day and bury yourself in work, barely speak to me or Lily, act like we're just roommates sharing space. And now you want to play the victim because I've found ways to be happy despite your neglect. Is that what this is about? My neglect? Yes. When was the last time you really looked at me, really listened when I talked, made me feel like I mattered? Marcus stood slowly, and for a moment I thought he might finally fight back, might show some emotion. Instead, he just nodded. You're right, I have been neglectful, but that's going to change. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to start paying much closer attention to everything, starting now. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. It was a screenshot of my text conversation with Damien from the previous day, including my complaints about Marcus and Damien's suggestion that we take a break. Below the screenshot was a simple message. Thought you should know your lunch friend is sharing your private conversations. Be careful who you trust. I stared at the screen in shock and fury. Damien had betrayed me, shared our private messages with someone, probably Clara. But who was texting me now? And why? My phone rang, making me jump. It was Rose. Hey sis, can you talk? Not really, I'm at work. Alund, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you having an affair? The directness of the question caught me off guard. What? No, why would you ask that? Because Paul saw you at that bistro place downtown last week with some guy. He said you two looked close. Paul, Rose's husband, had always disapproved of me. Now he was spying on me too, It was a work meeting, Rose. God, why is everyone so paranoid? Because you're acting weird, Elund. Secretive. Happy 1 minute, stressed the next. And Marcus called me yesterday, asking if you'd been staying late at work. He called you? Yeah, and I had to lie for you because I had no idea what you've been telling him. But I'm not doing it anymore. Whatever's going on, you need to figure it out before you lose everything. After Rose hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on anything. The walls were definitely closing in now, and I was running out of people to trust. That evening, as I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street that I didn't recognize. As I walked to the front door, I could swear I saw someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching. Inside, Marcus was helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table. They both looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how similar their expressions were. Wary, guarded, like they were looking at a stranger. "How was work?" Marcus asked politely. "Fine," I replied, setting down my purse. "Long day." "I'm sure," he said, and something in his tone made me look at him more closely. There was a manila folder on the counter that I hadn't noticed before. "What's that?" "Just some paperwork," Marcus replied. "Nothing you need to worry about." But as he said it, he pulled the folder closer to himself, and I caught a glimpse of official-looking letterhead that made my blood run cold. The process server arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. The doorbell rang just as I was applying mascara, and when I answered it, a professional-looking woman in a navy suit handed me a thick manila envelope. "Elund Morel?" "Yes?" "You've been served. Have a good day." She was gone before I could ask any questions, leaving me standing in my doorway holding what felt like a bomb. The return address showed the law firm of Patterson, Williams and Associates. I'd never heard of them, but the weight of the envelope told me this was serious. Inside were legal documents I could barely comprehend through my panic. Words jumped out at me. Petition for legal separation, custody arrangement, financial disclosure, evidence of marital misconduct. My hand shook as I flipped through page after page of meticulously documented evidence. Phone records showing calls and texts to Damien's number. Credit card statements with highlighted charges from Bistro Moderne. A timeline of my activities cross-referenced with my claimed whereabouts. But the worst part was the photographs. Someone had been following me. Pictures of me entering and leaving the restaurant. Pictures of Damien and me walking to our cars. Pictures of us laughing, his hand on my arm, my face bright with the kind of happiness I hadn't shown at home in months. At the bottom of the stack was a letter in Marcus's careful handwriting. "Elund, I had hoped I was wrong. I wanted to believe your explanations, to trust that my suspicions were just paranoia, brought on by stress and miscommunication. But the evidence speaks for itself. I've filed for legal separation and primary custody of Lily. I think we both know this marriage has been over for a while. I was just too afraid to admit it. My lawyer will be in touch to discuss arrangements. Please don't try to contact me directly. All communication should go through legal counsel from now on." Marcus, I sank onto the couch, the papers scattered around me, trying to process what had just happened. This methodical, thorough Marcus was someone I didn't recognize. Where was the conflict-avoidant man who'd rather let things slide than make waves? My phone rang. It was Rose. "Elund, what the hell is going on? Marcus just called me asking for Paul's contact information. Something about witness statements." "He's divorcing me," I said numbly. "What? Why would he? Oh God, Elund, please tell me you didn't actually have an affair." "It wasn't an affair. It was just lunch meetings, just talking. We never even kissed." "But you were emotionally involved with another man." Yes, maybe. I don't know." Rose was quiet for a long moment. "Elund, you need to get a lawyer, right now. Don't talk to anyone else until you do." After Rose hung up, I called in sick to work and spent the day trying to reach Damien. His phone went straight to voicemail every time. When I drove by his office, the receptionist told me he was out of town on business indefinitely. Clara had won. Somehow she'd gathered evidence, shared it with Marcus, and convinced her husband to disappear until the dust settled. I'd been outmaneuvered completely. That evening, I sat in my empty house. Marcus had taken Lily to his parents' house, staring at the legal papers and trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The doorbell rang again, and for a wild moment I hoped it might be Marcus, ready to talk this through rationally. Instead, it was Helen. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the living room. She looked around at the scattered legal documents with disgust. 6 years, she said finally. 6 years my son gave you. A beautiful home, a precious daughter, his complete devotion. And this is how you repay him. Helen, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. Her voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. Do you think I'm stupid, Alund? Do you think I didn't notice the changes in you? The way you stopped caring about family dinners, stopped asking about Marcus's day, stopped being present for your own daughter. I made some mistakes, but... Mistakes? Helen laughed bitterly. Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk or being late to a school play. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices, made over weeks and months to betray your family. I never slept with him. Oh, well then, I suppose that makes it all fine. Helen's sarcasm was withering. You only gave your emotional energy, your time, your attention, your loyalty to another man. You only made Marcus feel like a fool in his own home, made him question his own sanity when he knew something was wrong. I sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed by the fury in her voice. You want to know what convinced Marcus to finally take action? Helen continued. It wasn't the restaurant bills or the mysterious phone calls. It was Lily. Lily? She drew a picture at school last week. The assignment was to draw their family. Do you know what she drew? Marcus reading her a bedtime story, Marcus making breakfast, Marcus pushing her on the swing. And in the corner, tiny and separate from everyone else, was a figure labeled Mommy, staring at a rectangle that was obviously a phone. The words hit me like physical blows. That doesn't mean... It means your 6-year-old daughter has noticed that you care more about whatever's on that screen than you do about her. It means Marcus finally realized that protecting his daughter was more important than protecting your feelings. Helen gathered her purse and headed for the door. I hope it was worth it, Alund. I hope those lunch dates and text messages were worth losing the best man you'll ever know. After she left, I sat in the silence of my house, really looking around for the first time in months. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me. Marcus and me on our wedding day, the 3 of us at Lily's first birthday, last Christmas morning with Lily between us on the couch. When had I stopped seeing what I had and started focusing only on what I thought I was missing? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The custody hearing is next Friday at 2 p.m. I suggest you get a lawyer. I stared at the message, realizing that Marcus wasn't just leaving me. He was taking Lily too. The family courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat beside my hastily hired attorney, David Chen, watching Marcus enter with his lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s who carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case. Marcus looked different, thinner maybe, but also somehow more solid, more present than he'd been in months. When his eyes briefly met mine across the room, there was no anger there, just a kind of sad resolution that was somehow worse than fury would have been. Your Honor, Marcus's attorney began, my client is seeking primary custody of the minor child, Lily Morell, age 6, based on evidence of the respondent's ongoing emotional affair and subsequent abandonment of parental responsibilities. The words abandonment of parental responsibilities hit me like a physical blow. I started to stand, but David's hand on my arm kept me in my seat. We'll have our turn, he whispered. For the next hour, I watched my life dissected with clinical precision. phone records showing hundreds of texts and calls to Damien during school hours, work hours, family time. Credit card statements revealing lunches that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. Testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed my behavior at the barbecue. But the worst was when Marcus himself took the stand. "Mr. Morell, can you describe the changes you observed in your wife's behavior over the past few months?" Marcus's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. She became distant from both Lily and me. She was constantly on her phone, even during family activities. When I tried to talk to her about it, she became defensive and accused me of being paranoid or controlling. "How did this affect your daughter?" Lily started asking why Mommy was always busy, why she couldn't put her phone down during bedtime stories. She drew pictures at school that showed her family as just her and me, with Alund separated and distracted. I wanted to object, to explain that I'd been struggling, that I'd felt invisible in my own home. But when David finally got his chance to present my side, it all sounded hollow. "Your Honor, my client admits to poor judgment in forming an inappropriate friendship, but there was no physical affair, no abandonment of her child. Mrs. Morell is a devoted mother who made some mistakes while struggling with feelings of isolation in her marriage." The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the evidence with careful attention. When she finally spoke, her words sealed my fate. "While I understand that marriages go through difficult periods, the evidence shows a pattern of deception and emotional unavailability that has negatively impacted the minor child. I'm granting primary custody to Mr. Morell, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Morell until she completes family counseling." Supervised visitation. The words echoed in my head as I stumbled out of the courtroom. I would see my daughter twice a week, for 4 hours at a time, with a court-appointed supervisor watching my every interaction. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was waiting by his car. For a moment, I thought he might say something, offer some word of comfort or explanation. Instead, he just looked at me with those sad, resigned eyes. "I never wanted it to come to this," he said quietly. "Then why did it have to?" I asked, tears finally coming. "Why couldn't we just talk about it, work through it?" "Because you weren't talking to me, Alund. You were talking to him. You were sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your time with him. There was nothing left for us to work with." "It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," Marcus interrupted. "It meant that when you were unhappy, instead of coming to me, you went to someone else. It meant that when you needed attention, you got it from someone else. It meant that our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. It was just something to complain about to your lunch date." The truth of his words was devastating because I couldn't deny them. "What about Lily?" I asked desperately. "She needs her mother." "She needs a mother who's present, who pays attention to her instead of her phone, who doesn't teach her that it's okay to lie to people you love." A car pulled up behind Marcus, a familiar sedan that made my heart stop. Clara Voss got out, followed by Lily, who ran straight to Marcus with obvious joy. "Daddy, did you ask the judge? Can Clara come to my soccer game?" "We'll see, sweetheart," Marcus said, lifting her into his arms. "Why don't you get in the car? We'll be right there." I stared at Clara, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "You two are together." "We're friends," Marcus said simply. "Clara's going through her own divorce. We've been helping each other navigate the legal process. And bonding over what terrible spouses we had." The bitterness in my voice was ugly, but I couldn't stop it. Clara stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "We bonded over what it feels like to discover that the person you trusted most in the world was lying to you every day. Over what it's like to realize your marriage ended months before you knew it was over. Damien and you had an emotional affair that destroyed 2 marriages," Clara interrupted. "The physical details don't matter. You both chose to invest your emotional energy outside your marriages instead of working on the relationships you'd committed to." I watched Lily in the back seat of Marcus's car, coloring in a book that Clara had apparently bought for her. My daughter looked happy, settled, secure, more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. "She's not her mother," I said desperately. "No," Marcus agreed, "but she's someone who pays attention to Lily, someone who listens when she talks, someone who puts her phone away during family time." The implication was clear. Clara was doing all the things I'd stopped doing. As they drove away, I stood alone in the courthouse parking lot, watching my family disappear with another woman. The woman whose husband I'd thought I wanted, who'd quietly gathered evidence while I'd been too intoxicated by attention to notice the trap closing around me. 6 months later, I sat in my studio apartment, looking at the latest batch of supervised visitation reports. Lily was polite during our court-mandated visits, but distant. She talked about Clara's cooking, Clara's help with homework, Clara's bedtime stories. She asked when she could go home to Daddy and Clara. My phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Saw the engagement announcement in the paper." "I'm sorry, sis. I didn't need to ask what announcement. I'd been expecting it." Marcus and Clara had found in each other what they'd lost in their marriages: partnership, attention, emotional availability. They'd built something new from the wreckage of what Damien and I had destroyed. I thought about Damien sometimes, wondered if he ever regretted the choices that had cost us both our families. But mostly, I thought about the moment I'd decided that my marriage was boring, that I deserved more excitement, that a little harmless flirtation couldn't hurt anyone. I'd been right about one thing. It had been harmless to me in the moment. The harm had come later, in waves, destroying everything I'd actually cared about while I'd been busy chasing something that had never been real. The last text I'd received from Damien months ago had said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Now, sitting alone in my empty apartment, I finally understood that what I'd been looking for had been at home all along. I just hadn't been paying attention.